last time our session took us a whole hour and a bit. I think this session is probably going to take the same amount of time just because, hi Lily, just because pricing is kind of a also very lengthy thing to talk about. Hi Olga. I'll try to be very quick. I usually ramble. So there it is. So this time we are going to start with pricing, right? Last week we talked about all the steps that you have to go through to start selling your dolls. And it was pretty long, and for those of you that want the written version of it, I turned it into a PDF, and some personal notes added to the conversation will be sent to everybody that's on Stitchy Notes. Stitchy Notes is my doll making newsletter. There are different formulas to price your handmade items. Most of them, I find, in my opinion, don't really apply to dolls, especially natural fiber art dolls, because they are just so time intensive. If you are making simpler dolls, if your dolls are more Waldorf inspired, yada yada, those pricing formulas might be more close to what you can charge for your work. But if you're starting to do needle felting, or if you make very elaborate outfits, the number of hours that you work on a doll are going to skyrocket. So I'll talk a little bit about my progression when I started making dolls, just so that you understand how I transitioned and how it happened for me. Maybe it's the same for you, or maybe you would be able to take some takeaways from that and make a decision based on where you are. If you're just starting, if you're somewhere in the middle, if you're starting to do more needle felting, or if you're starting to use higher price materials, etc. So when I started selling my dolls, I didn't do any of this. I didn't even know how many hours they took me, because I was basically working half an hour here, half an hour there. I would take my girls to the park and I would, work on a shoe. And then when my babies were in bed, then I would work on the doll hair, or things where I would need to have needles and scissors around. My kids were really curious, so there was no chance, almost like no chance for me to do any sort of work while they were awake. So when I started selling dolls, which obviously the dolls do not even remotely look like to what they look now, I just said, what I need to buy wool next month, I'm just going to charge $30 for this doll, because this is how much wool I need to buy. And then next time I'm going to buy $50 for this doll, because I need to buy fabrics or elastic or something. So in the beginning, I was just charging a fixed amount based on what I was basically needing. It wasn't a business. It wasn't even my hobby. It was just like these very intense need to keep learning, and I needed to fund the material somehow. So very luckily for me, I started selling my dolls right away. They didn't sell immediately, but I did make a few sales right away. Mostly local people. A friend of mine had a store in town, and so I would have some of my stuff there. And I also made very, very cushy, kind of like toddler gear dolls made out of sweaters with pointy hats, and I was selling those dolls for $15 just because I wanted to be able to earn some money to buy more supplies to get going. So that's where I started. That's what allowed me to people to start getting to know me, to have trust that I would actually sell them the doll and ship the doll. I would initially, I charged like $5 shipping, though to ship out of Canada, it would cost me like $12, right? So in the very, very beginning, it was a very out of my pocket kind of thing. Then I started like a year and a half into that system. I think about a year, I started taking note of my my materials. So I made a list of the cost of my materials for one specific doll. I was ordering custom hand spun yarn, and so the yarn would cost me $40-50 per skein, and then I would add the cost of the wool and the cost of the fabric and a few odds and ends, and then I would double the cost of the materials, and that would be the price of the doll. That was a very simple thing for me back then because I could still not keep track of my hours. For another, I don't know, 8 months or so, a year or so of this formula, if you want to call it, of this procedure, I was taking into account how many materials I was investing in X doll, and then if I spent $40 in the cost of the doll, I would charge $80. If I spent $60, I would charge $120, and so forth and so forth. So that I was at least getting reimbursed to some degree by the cost of the materials. I was not taking into consideration any of the amount of hours that I was working on my dolls because I was learning. I didn't even consider myself a doll maker. I just thought I just want to learn. I just want to keep people happy. I want to make my dolls available to children. I want other kids to play with my dolls. So this is the best way that I can think of to earn some money, right? If I spend $50, at least I want to sell this doll for $100. But I wasn't doing any like serious accounting of how much time it would take me, my business costs, none of that stuff. In the beginning, like I said, first I was just charge an amount for what I needed to get done the following month, materials wise, and then for the second step of the process from that was, okay, how much did it actually this doll cost me? Because I started ordering that very expensive hand spun yarn, and it'd be pricey. Sometimes I would spend like close to $80 just on the hair material. So I wanted to get some money reimbursed for that. I also around this time I started offering custom dolls, and if most of my dolls were costing the customer around $120 to $130, these were 16 to 18 inch dolls stuffed with wool with hand spun yarn. I would just charge $30 more or $50 more for a custom doll, just because I wanted to make the custom doll process a bit more creative for me and my customers. So I have always added more, I have always made the custom work more expensive because I think there is the added creativity of working under someone else's guidelines. And a few years after that, I started then taking account of how many hours I was working. I had been making dolls for like 3 years. I was like more knowledgeable. I could design the pattern more easily. I started sculpting the dolls more. So then I said, wow, now I can't just sit down and make a doll on the fly. Like, I have to actually think about it and design it better and work more in the construction. And so I started taking into consideration the amount of hours I was working on the doll, and saying, okay, I worked at around that time, I would say my dolls will take between 25 and 30-ish hours dressed. So I would say, okay, so I wasn't doing the outfits I'm doing now either. So okay, I would like to maybe get paid $10 an hour, so that would be, you know, $300 for just my work. And then let's say the doll cost me $60 to $100, that would make the price of this doll $400. And it was really uncomfortable for me at the beginning when I started charging over $300 for the dolls. And then when I made the jump, I remember it really well, when I made the jump from charging $320, $340 for a doll to the jump to charging $565. That was a huge jump for me. And it was basically because I designed a new doll. This doll was way bigger. It was 23 inches, so more wool, more time. The clothes took more fabric, etc., etc. And basically because I started thinking of myself as a doll maker and seeing this as a real business, and I said, okay, I need to take into account how much time it takes me to make the dolls. So then I will start taking, I timed myself, I took care of the hours, and then I said, okay, so this amount of hours at $10 an hour, and this amount of cost of materials, and let's add a few extras just to sweeten the deal, and cross our fingers, and let's hope I sell the doll. And I did. I started selling the dolls over $500, and that was like, I literally pooped my pants every time I put a doll for sale for that amount, because I thought it was ridiculous to be charging that much money, right? So a few years of that process of taking into consideration how much the dolls were taking me to construct and build, and then I started adding, you know what, I write 2 or 3, sometimes even 4 blogs for each doll. I take thousands of photos, and I'm spending a lot of time editing the photos and adding a watermark and loading them to Flickr. This was the Flickr times, and putting everything here and there, and now I have to pay for a website, and now I have to pay for this, and I have to pay for that. So then I started adding, for example, an hour of what we're going to go over, which I call supplemental hours, which I would say I would charge an hour condensed or 2 for photography. I've never charged for what it takes me to write a blog post and actually load it and all of that, though it takes me like 3 to 4 hours to do that. But I've never actually included that amount of hours in what I charge for it all. And so I would say, okay, X amount of hours of creation, X amount of cost of materials and the actual doll creation, an hour of photography, and an hour for packaging, because I would go to the post office and it would take me time to send the dolls away. I would make a doll sachet and some like little extras and things like that. I also didn't factoring the cost of the packaging supplies or any of that, right? And so now we're in a different pricing scenario, because I am charging for photography, I am charging for packaging, I am charging for the materials, and I'm charging for my work hours. And still the price per hour was very low. Then, a few years into that, I started adding the business cost, what it costs me to run my business. Obviously, is not a full cost, because it's really hard to determine this. I would say that you would only get to this kind of formula or add-ons to your doll prices once you actually know what it costs you to run your business for a full year or for 2 years, because things will morph and change. Also, you will see how many dolls realistically you can make either per month or per year, and divide your business cost between that amount of dolls. You can't, in February, if you just started, know what your entire business cost is going to be and add it to the price of your dolls, because what if in October you sign up for something else, or you have to buy a very fancy camera, or etc., etc. So it is a process. It is some sort of a journey to start adding certain costs to your dolls, because when you start, you just don't have that overhead. You don't, in some cases, you're gonna have to pay business insurance. In some countries, if you're selling toys, if you're selling dolls, you need to have business insurance. And maybe just the first month that you start selling a doll, you don't have that cost, or you don't have a website, or you're not paying for a newsletter provider, because you're just using free available tools to you to sell your dolls. So it's, you won't be able to add this cost until a few years in business, but it's very helpful to you that you anticipate what it might cost you and what it might eventually earn you as a business to sell your dolls. So there's a whole walk of you here. Now we're gonna move into, okay, so you are starting to sell your dolls, right? How do you start pricing them? So my advice to you is to not go through the full gamut of things I did, and not say, well, I want to buy wool next month and I need 3 pounds, so I'll just charge for this doll the wool that I want to buy next month. That would not be a very good business move, though obviously you can do whatever you want. You can choose to charge whatever you want for your doll. If you just want to get your dolls in the hands of people and you want people to start talking about them and giving you feedback, you can give them away for free, right? But that's not the point. Here we're talking about selling them. So you can ask however the amount of hours it took you to create it, however the cost of the materials. Maybe you're using materials that you bought 10 years ago, so you're not really even factoring in the price of the materials. You just want to sell the doll, so charge whatever you want for it. That's how I started. That's how I started making sales. That's how I started getting feedback, making very inexpensive dolls. Also, they weren't taking me the time that they take me now. So now I'm going to show you this next slide, and I am going to turn off the comments and the little people popping up so that you guys can see it better. So now you're gonna start selling your dolls, and I would like you to start by tracking your hours. We're thinking that if we already went through the previous process, that you have already designed first and foremost a pattern by yourself. You're not using someone else's pattern. You are not selling off of someone else's pattern. This is your pattern. You've designed it, it's your creation, you stand by its quality and its durability. You even certify the thing, you even have the permits, you have a business name, you have done all the research. That means that you are treating this as a business. Then, as a eventually very successful business owner, you want to track how many hours you actually work on your business. But first and foremost, we're going to track the hours of creation into your doll. So you are going to time yourself every time you work on the doll, and when you get up to go pee or your kid asks you for lunch, then you stop the timer and you stop. And it's going to give you a really good idea. Maybe you think the doll takes you 30 hours, but it doesn't actually take you 30 hours. Or maybe something that you think doesn't take you that long, like embroidering the eyes. Holy smokes, it took you 2 actual hours to just embroider the eyes. For me, and just to give you a heads up, I have been embroidering doll eyes for 11 years, and I cannot, for the life of me, do one eye in less than 45 minutes. When I make the eyes very small and they're tiny, they take me 30 minutes each. So 1 hour of my doll creation work goes into just the eyes, right? Just to get you an idea of what it takes to make natural fiber art dolls, or Waldorf inspired dolls, or whatever you want to call them. If you are making other types of doll, rag dolls or whatever, they're still going to take you time. You are still going to spend a lot of time embroidering. You are still going to spend a lot of time stuffing. Maybe you can make 3 dolls in 8 hours. That's awesome. The more dolls you can make in 1 week, for example, the higher your income is going to be. But that's only if you successfully sell them, and B, if that's what your business is all about, to have a consistent amount of dolls per week. That's not my business model. I don't make X amount of dolls per week, let alone per month. Like, I just don't do that. I do the dolls as they come to me and as I can make them and as I can physically and emotionally and psychologically create them. So sometimes I'm gonna make 4, sometimes I'm gonna make 1, some months I don't make a doll at all. So you're going to track your hours, timing yourself from the beginning to the end of the doll. And I mean from, okay, I'm bringing the fabric out, I'm tracing, I'm sewing, I'm cutting, I'm stuffing, I'm forming a head, I'm needle felting, I'm covering the head, I'm assembling the doll, I'm sewing ears, belly button, bums, the whole thing, the hair, I'm making the hair, I'm attaching the hair. The doll is finished, it's ready for clothing. Then, and this is where I've, in my blog post regarding the 5 steps I would do different, that I told you, you need to do something and do it many times. Not only you get more efficient, but you also, people start to recognize your work and they expect the thing over and over. And that might not be very creative for you, that might not be where you want to go, but that's what it helps to build a market for your work, for people to see the same thing or similar things from you. So if you start with 8-inch dolls, start selling 8-inch dolls. Don't go from an 8-inch doll to a 25-inch doll to a 12-inch doll. Do an 8-inch doll over and over and over, create a market for them, then add a new style. So you're going to pick a style, you're going to time yourself from beginning to end for that doll, then you're going to pick a basic outfit. So if you want your dolls to all have a dress, pants, underwear, shoes, and a hat, that is your basic outfit, and that's where you're going to get started. You're going to start with that outfit, how long it took you, and you're going to time yourself. So that's going to give you a basic idea. Okay, the doll takes me 20 hours and the outfit takes me 10, or the doll takes me 30 and the outfit takes me 70 hours. Whatever it takes for you, whatever your basic outfit is, whatever your basic doll is, right? Or whatever your idea for this doll design is going to be. This is the doll that I'm going to be making all the time. I need to know what it takes me to do it. Once you time yourself, that you're gonna have the basic amount of hours invested in producing a fully dressed doll, because reality, you won't be able to sell it naked, or maybe you can. Then you are going to do the cost of your materials per doll, right? Not the cost of your materials this month or next month, or how many meters of fabric you bought 3 months ago. You're gonna say, okay, this specific doll pattern has X amount of yards or meters of fabric involved in it. It has, I'm gonna cut 1 full skein of DMC thread, because whatever, I actually need 1 color for the eyes, and this another full skein of thread for the bum, and whatever. You're not using obviously the full amount, but they're so minimal, like it costs like 50 cents per skein of DMC or something like that, so you can charge the full thing per doll, because you're obviously not going to charge maybe the full amount of sewing thread or the full amount of whatever. Maybe you can be super mathematical whiz and calculate that out of 1 spool of thread you get $5 or $10 or $20. So then you can actually add the cost of the sewing thread. You are going to say, okay, I normally break a needle per doll, a felting needle, and they cost $2.50 or $3. So then I will add 1 felting needle per doll, or say I use 0.5 of a needle per doll or whatever you want. The whole point is that you have to take into considerations the materials that were invested in this specific doll so that you calculate a basic price or your starting price or something like that. Wool, hair materials, caps, the fabric, also the materials for the clothing. If you needed X amount of elastic, X amount of ribbon, 2 buttons, 5 snaps, jersey for the underwear, jersey for the socks. I need 1 good skein of yarn to do a sweater and a hat, etc., etc., etc. So you are going to calculate the time that it took you from point A to point B and to make the doll, from point A to point B to make the clothes, and then the cost of your materials. I am going to open the little comments again. So the thing here is that what you choose to charge per hour, let's say the material cost is easy, right? If it took you $70 or $50 or $85 to create the doll, you know what it cost you. But how much do you charge per hour? That is a very tricky question. That it's only up to you. You can add it up. Let's say it took you 20 hours to make this doll, and it cost you want to pay yourself $10 an hour. That is less than minimum wage, but then that means that you're charging at least $200 for your time for this doll, and then that it cost you $65 for the material. Then you're going to charge $265 for this doll, right? But let's say that in this equation of the $265, you are not taking into account the fees that you're going to pay once you receive that money, the cost of running your business, etc., etc., nor the taxes that are going to be deducted off your income once you claim all your expenses. So then you say, after a few years of doing this business, you're going to figure out, you know what, every single time I make a doll and I sell it for this much, and this is how many dolls per year I can sell, so I'm earning about this much money through doll making, and I end up paying this much tax, this much ink tax. Then if I want to make more money, I need to charge at least the amount, this percentage extra on the price of the doll, so that I can have the money for my taxes, so that I am not panicking when it comes to file my taxes, and I know more or less how much is going to cost. So then you budget for that, but you won't know until you've at least made dolls for a couple of years. And this is what I call the supplemental work hours. I'm going to turn off the comments again so you guys can read that. So you as you start working, you're going to see that there is not just the doll creation anymore, and it's not anymore from the beginning. It has never. You're going to be working on this business, and it's not just about making dolls. That would be lovely, but it's not about that only, and it's not about just what it costs you to make the dolls in the actual materials, because it's going to cost you on other areas that are not necessarily included in the doll. So some of the supplemental work hours that you will maybe be encountering are the photography, like I mentioned. It is going to be very necessary for you to work on photography in order to A, sell your dolls successfully, B, make them look the best possible way they can, C, to create a sort of aura or branding around your dolls, and for people to distinguish them between the massive amount of dolls that are available right now. So photography is going to be very big, and it is time intensive, not just to produce great photos, but to learn photography. You're gonna have to get books, you might have to take classes, you might have to take a class on how to use your camera, you might have to buy new camera, you might have to buy lighting, you might have to invest time in producing a set where you're going to be photographing your dolls. So supplemental work hours, photography and editing are really big, at least for me. And since I am speaking from experience here, I'm just telling you what my actual workload is. Photographing the dolls and editing their photos takes me a really long time. I don't charge for all the hours I spend taking photos, but I do charge like a minimum of at least 1 hour or two, depending on how many blogs I did for that specific doll. So if I did 3 blogs, I charge for 3 hours of photography. And maybe this is something else to consider. Maybe you want to get paid for your work hours, and you say, I'm going to charge $20 an hour for my doll making hours. But then because photography is not as intensive, or maybe it's not as like emotionally draining as doll making is, then I'll charge 10 hours for my photography, or I charge 10 hours for packaging, right? It's not as intense, and not as maybe photography is, but like packaging your orders is not as skill necessary. So maybe you can charge $5 for your packaging hours, and in 5 hours for your accounting, and 5 hours for crap and corruption. So you charge a higher amount per hour for the actual doll creation, and you charge a less amount per hour for your other supplemental work hours. You are going to spend time listing dolls. You are going to spend a lot of time marketing. You're going to spend time ordering supplies. You're going to spend a lot of time on social media, creating posts, tagging, replying to people, networking. So that is all hours of your life that you are spending in your business that are not creating dolls, but that you still have to do them. You're going to spend a lot of time in customer service, that is answering questions regarding shipping, regarding sizes, regarding custom orders, regarding is this doll available? How much it's gonna cost? Can I pay for it in a layaway plan? Can I cancel my order? Can we work on a custom order? You know what I mean? There's going to be daily hours devoted to emails and to conversations with your customers, which is extremely important because these are your people that are interested in buying your dolls. There's going to be time spending packaging your orders. You want to pack them safe, you want to pack them beautifully, and you are going to have to go take them to the post office. And obviously in your accounting and keeping track of all these things that you are doing. In some countries, you need to tell the tax people how many hours a week you work on your business. In other countries, you can just ballpark it. I can't give you legal advice, obviously. I can only tell you what I know from some of my friends that are also doll makers. So maybe you want to eventually, as you start running your business and you've been doing it for a few years, maybe you want to start charging for these supplemental work hours to make your business sustainable and to make you earn enough money that maybe one day you can live entirely of this, or maybe make you more money and give you a higher sense of achievement so that you can then create better and more beautiful dolls. Speaking of supplemental hours, I spent, we have 15 minutes left. I spent 3 hours yesterday writing the PDF for the live stream that I did last week. Nobody pays me for that, but I am doing this gladly. I just want everybody to know that doll making for me has been a great some sort of lifesaver, actually. But so I want to be able to help others do it themselves. Okay, so I'm going to continue with the next slide because we've been on this thing for 45 minutes. So the other, as you go along your business, you might have to do also calculate the business cost into the actual price of the doll. And this is where it's going to be tricky because you need to do this for a few years before you know what your actual whole year business cost is, which is going to be mainly the cost of your website, the cost of your domain, the email service, like what it costs to have an email with info@beautifulhandmadedolls.com instead of Fabiola Perez at gmail.com or hotmail.com or whatever. It's just going to look a bit more professional to have an email with your actual business, with your domain on it. So that's going to cost you X amount depending on the service provider that you choose. It's going to cost you X amount per year. Your website's going to cost you X amount per year. You started with 50 people in your newsletter, and you have 1,000 people in your newsletter, which is awesome, but now it costs you money to send them emails. It costs me money every month to send you guys all emails, so I have to calculate that into my yearly business cost. Then you might have to subscribe to a certain software to edit your photos like I do, or to edit your videos like I do. So that's another cost per year. You might have to pay insurance to run your business, or to at least insure your equipment, your computer, your laptop, your camera, your sewing machine, really important, right? So you might actually have to pay for insurance to operate as a toy maker. So that depends on where you live and what kind of business you have. That also goes into the overall business cost. You might have to pay for data storage for your videos and your photos and your website and your blah, 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 and to back up your vlog. So that might be another cost that when you start selling dolls, you didn't even think about. But hey, now you're like, yep, where am I going to store all these PDFs and all this crap and corruption that I keep pumping out? I need a place to store them. You might have to pay every year for a business license. You're going to have your packaging supplies, right? It goes into your business costs, and maybe you charge per doll. You include it in the price of the doll, or maybe you charge postage and handling. So it's up to you to say, okay, well, I buy a beautiful box to ship my dolls in, and each box costs me $18. And then tissue and postcards and business cards and everything that's in it costs me X amount per unit. So then I end up paying around $20 per box shipped on just like the actual materials to ship the dolls. So I know that if this doll is gonna cost $500, I need to add 20 for the shipping material, so it's gonna cost $520. And then I'm just going to charge actual shipping price to my customers. So it's $520 for the doll plus $18 or $25 to actually ship it, depending where you ship from and where it is going, right? Marketing materials, etc., etc. So you're going to have to, sorry, have something in my eye here. You're going to have to calculate your business cost, and then but how do you add business cost to a doll? Because how can you forecast how many dolls per year you make? So you can only forecast that as you've made them for a few years. So you can say, okay, I normally make 12 of these big dolls and 20 of these little dolls. So then I will give a higher percentage of cost to the big dolls because they will cost more money, and the little dolls I can't ask the same amount of money per doll that I ask for the big dolls. So then I'm just gonna charge, I don't know, $5 overall business cost per little doll, and then I will charge $25 business cost for the big dolls, because to sell the bigger dolls, they're more expensive and I have to work harder at selling them. I also spend more hours making them, so it costs me physically and if effectively in money, it costs me more money to make them. So then another thing you can do to figure out your pricing is to do a comparison of market prices. And this is something that you should really consider about, because it can give you an idea of what other people are charging for their dolls. Obviously, you're gonna have to find dolls that are similar to what you are producing or intend to produce. You're gonna have to find dolls that are within the size range, within the clothing range, within the overall aesthetic look, techniques, hairstyle that you plan to sell, right? And say, okay, I'm kind of a sort of in this category. What are the prices? So then you can compare several makers, compare at least 5. Compare some in the lower range, some in the medium range, and some in the higher range for the same style of doll, right? And then say, add more data to your spreadsheet. Add how many years this person has been selling dolls. Well, her shop says that she opened her shop in September 2017. And this one over here I can see she's been making dolls since 1997, right? So obviously experience and the time, the market that doll maker has built for her dolls allows her to sell at higher prices, or at least to feel very confident in the amount that she wants to charge for, which might not be the same thing for someone who's just starting, right? And then compare your data and maybe choose a position that you're comfortably with. Maybe you want to say, well, you know what? This is the amount of hours I'm spending in the doll. This is what it costs me. More or less market prices for this kind of doll are within this range. I don't feel comfortable being in the higher range. I'm just going to put myself in the middle. At least you have more information to work with and to feel more comfortable for your prices. So that is it for our pricing scenario. My advice obviously is to log in your hours, log in your cost per doll, shoot for a price that you're comfortable with. I can't tell you, if you're starting making dolls, you can only charge $5 per hour. I can't say that to you. I can also tell you that I earn $20 per hour, because that's not true. I don't make that much money. I wish I did. I can't obviously say charge this much money for your dolls, but if you do this work, if you go through this process, at least you know that this is like the business-like thing to do, that you can understand better what it costs you hourly, in hours of your divine life to create the dolls, and what it costs you monetarily to create your dolls. And then you can come up with a price that you say, well, you know what, this is the minimum I can charge for my dolls, knowing that out of this money, I'm gonna have to pay a website, a newsletter, buy software to edit my photos. In the beginning, you can do almost everything free, but as your business grows, you're gonna have to start investing money into it. So maybe to begin with, your cost is going to be really small, so you don't even factor in any extra business cost or the business expenses to run it. But you are charging for your supplies, and you are charging for the time that you're spending on your work. You can charge minimum wage. You can charge more money than that. It's up to you what you want to earn per hour. Another thing, and I wrote it here, and I wanted to mention it highly. And these are some of the notes that I'm including in the PDF, is that I highly advise you to have something called your bread and butter, so that it's a doll that takes you very few hours to create, very few cost in materials, and that you sell that regularly, whatever regularly is. Maybe you have another job, maybe you homeschool your kids, maybe you can't devote as many hours to your doll business as you would like, but then you have something that it can be easily put into the hands of people, and then that will create a market and awareness for your dolls if you're just starting. And every now and then you can include a more intense doll, right? If you are doing this as a passion, you might obviously want to keep learning. So then you say, well, I really want to make a doll with a needle felted face, or I really want to use a weft, or I really want to make a historical dress or something like that. And those dolls will be very far and few in between, because you're going to have to charge more money for them. So it's going to be harder to sell them. But if you have something that you are regularly offering that is of little amount of hours for you to create, that it costs little, therefore it will cost your customers less, it might be easier for you to sell that. Maybe not, but in my experience, dolls that are in the lower price range are much easier to sell, and also for me to create, so I can make a few of them at a time, and so the cost is less per doll. Right? Another thing is, even though we're treating this as a business, I want you to know that most doll makers don't live off entirely of their work. They have someone else supporting them. They have someone else footing half of the bills of the home. And the ones that do, the ones that support their entire families through their work, I can count them in a hand, and they've been doing this for years and years and years and years. And another one is, I want you to go from here feeling gratitude. I want you to understand and be happy that you are even considering this. Like how awesome it is that you are actually thinking of turning doll making into your business, because you have such a thriving passion for it. That you are in a time and space where you have these options to you. You have the option to create a website with a few clicks. You have the option to talk to people who are interested in buying natural dolls with Instagram and Facebook and blogs and YouTube. Like, you have all these tools that cost little to no money in this day and age. You have, most likely, you're in a very awesome situation where you can order almost anything you need for your business online. You might be living in a country where that is not an option, right? Or you might be in a situation, you could be someone else in a completely different situation. You are not. You are here, you are learning, you're listening to all this business advice. And so that to me is awesome. And also, feel happy and grateful that you are considering this, that you are starting to feel brave enough to look at your dolls and say, I want to sell them. I want to put them in the hands of people, and that's something I want to do. And I want you to feel like proud of that, because not everybody goes through that, and not everybody has that strong heart to put their work out there. And we are going to be talking about marketing. We're going to dive into all the different things that you can do to market your dolls if you've already started selling them and you're not selling them as as successfully maybe as you thought, or what you can do beforehand to make sure that when you start selling your dolls, you have some eyeballs on your listings. Okay, so I'll see you guys. I'll see you ladies and guys next week. Thank you for being here, and I will be sending some awesome stuff tomorrow via Stitchy Notes. Bye bye.